Well, it was, technically speaking, the ideal outcome for this game for the Kraken. Not too happy about how they got there, but again, this is exactly how you would want it to go if you could pick the outcome. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken do hang on to beat the San Jose Sharks in San Jose 2-1 in overtime. Which, it's that overtime part that's where we get into why this was the ideal outcome for the Kraken, because not only do they get the important 2 points against one of the worst teams in the league, in fact, so bad that they're the first and still only team currently mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but they also hand the Sharks an important point in the standings that gets them at least a little step farther away from the best possible odds at getting Connor Bedard. But with that having been said, oh boy, do the Kraken have to get some things figured out for this home stretch, and especially come playoff time, if they want to win a playoff game, much less a playoff series. Because, well, I'd like to pretend that the Kraken did this on purpose, taking the game to overtime where they won it so that they could pick up those 2 points, while in the process, sneakily handing San Jose that 1 point in the standings to get them that little bit farther away from Bedard. I think we all know that that's not what happened. So, the Kraken did just come this close, while trying the entire time to win it in regulation, to handing San Jose their 7th win in 35 attempts so far, at home on the season, having already handed them one of those 6 that they still have. Credit where it's due, though. It is worth mentioning that, although coming into this game, of the 97 goaltenders that have played in the NHL this season, Money Puck had Reimer ranked near the bottom at 89th. Meanwhile, the Kraken, as we know, have been one of the highest scoring teams in the NHL, 5th still in goals per game, and 2nd in shooting percentage. So naturally, of course, Reimer is going to play at a Vezina level whenever he plays against the Kraken, being the guy that was in net for the shutout against Seattle the last time they were in San Jose a little while ago, and then just continues that to make it 5 straight periods of goalless hockey for the Kraken, starting out this game after what he did in the last one. And it's not that the Kraken weren't getting their chances offensively or just didn't show up to play this game. At least by the second period anyway. The first period admittedly was a little rough around the edges and honestly pretty sloppy at both ends of the ice by both teams, though you kind of expect that from a team like the Sharks in the position they're in the standings, and maybe not so much from a team like the Kraken, who look pretty safe to make the playoffs at this point. So ultimately, this is a game that the Kraken should have just been controlling from the beginning, but instead they're letting the Sharks just hang around, even with the Sharks basically trying to hand them the 2 points and push them out the door, as especially in the first period, but even through the second on the Sharks end of things, constantly turning over the puck in the offensive end, neutral zone, and even a few times in the defensive end, which the Kraken just weren't able to capitalize on, and then going the other way where the Kraken were also sloppy and giving up odd man rushes. The Sharks managed to even get a 2-on-0 that they didn't even get a shot on goal with, which should tell you just about everything you need to know about where this team's at right now. That having been said, even with the Sharks fumbling opportunity after opportunity the Kraken were handing them, it is worth mentioning that Grubauer is pretty much the only reason this game is still scoreless by the end of the second period, as he was absolutely answering Reimer at the other end, both goaltenders pretty much standing on their head in the face of everything their teams were allowing. Now, like I mentioned, the second period certainly was an improvement, at least for the Kraken anyway, from the first period, where both actually start out pretty much the same, with the Sharks getting an early power play in both periods, the Kraken killing off both of those pretty easily, and then not long after getting power plays of their own, which the one in the first period was pretty sloppy until just at the end they finally start to get a hold of things but don't score on it. Then in the second period, they really pressed hard to get a goal throughout that entire power play, but again, obviously don't score, and then continued that momentum for the next few minutes, but obviously still, it is again scoreless at the end of 2. Oh, and both periods also featuring fantastic saves by Grubauer. Granted, the one in the first period that comes in the final second of the first period, so got a little nervous there at the end, is not necessarily one that will make any highlight reels for saves of the year, as he does get a little bit lucky on it, but it comes off of a beautiful play by Erik Karlsson, which, it has to be said, it was very obvious whenever Karlsson, Couture, or Hurdle weren't on the ice for the Sharks, as the rest of that lineup is, well, there's a reason they are where they are, but Karlsson with a beautiful lead pass, and the shot, Grubauer's just able to get a little bit of it with his pad, enough that it goes off of the far post instead of going into the net. So the Kraken escape that scare again in the final second of the first, and then in the second period, it actually comes pretty early on during that San Jose power play, which I said the Kraken killed off both of those power plays pretty easy. The one dangerous look they get is in this one to start out the second. It's a nice crossing pass that gets through the entire chaos in front of the net, but Grubauer's able to dive back to the other side and make the glove save just in time to rob, I'm pretty sure it was Hurdle, and again, keep the Sharks off the board, and the Kraken still in the game with that 0-0 tie. The big problem, though, if you're the Kraken, of just letting a team hang around that you should be able to easily beat, is that the later that game stays tied, the more and more likely that one weird bounce or one questionable call can end up making the difference. And sure enough, eventually, just a couple minutes into the third period, that's what happens, as it's a pretty soft awarding of a penalty shot that allows the Sharks to end up getting awarded that penalty shot on what definitely was a hook, so there probably should have been a Sharks power play here, but instead the refs galaxy brain their way into a penalty shot, and of course, some guy who only had one NHL goal coming into this game ends up scoring his second here, as it was a very nice move, just holding onto the puck until Grubauer doesn't have time to react to just a quick shot into the 5-hole and into the back of the net to give the Sharks that 1-0 lead. So while again, it is frustrating that the current difference in the game is a questionable awarding of a penalty shot at very best, again, he definitely didn't have his chance of scoring a goal taken away with that hook, considering he still got a shot off on goal. But that's what happens when you don't put the game away early on and allow it to stay tied this late, is that one questionable call. Whether it's questionable or not, the Kraken should have had a lead and it shouldn't have ended up mattering at this point in the game. But here we are, the Sharks having a lead because the Kraken just couldn't get their stuff together through the first two periods. And to make matters worse, over the next few minutes, with the Sharks maintaining momentum, it was really starting to look like that was going to be the theme of this video, another frustrating rant-style video where, sure, the Kraken do end up losing on one very questionable call by an official, but the Kraken should have had the game put away by that point anyway, so really you can't even complain about it anyway. Fortunately though, against the flow of play, a few minutes later, the Kraken do catch the Sharks with another defensive blunder, and weirdly this time it was that top pairing of Erik Karlsson and actually old Kraken friend Derek Pouliot that allows Gord from, behind the Kraken net, quite literally, he's standing with the net directly in front of him. He, though, standing pretty much still in that spot behind the net, eventually just fires an absolute dart up the ice, catching that defensive pair off guard, with Bjorkstrand getting between them and behind them, getting that pass just past the center ice line on the breakaway, skating in and burying it top corner with a perfect shot just over the glove of Reimer to tie the game at 1. So we can all breathe a huge sigh of relief that the Kraken have at least tied up this game and should at the very least be able to get to overtime, if not use this to build momentum and eventually just win it in regulation. But although they do end up getting a power play not long after and actually get a couple of good chances on that power play, they do end up having this one go to overtime, where again it's 3-on-3, and although the Sharks have not been good at 5-on-5 this season, anything can happen in 3-on-3. Although there they are again tied with the Flames for one of the worst teams in overtime this season, with 13 losses coming into this game, and the Kraken eventually handing them their 14th. In overtime, that is. They have way more than that in regulation. But of course, before the Kraken do eventually finish off this game, they did have to make it interesting, as right off the faceoff, Wennberg's stick shatters, so it ends up being a 3-on-2.5 chance for the Sharks, obviously winning the faceoff with Wennberg's stick breaking on that faceoff. The Kraken do survive that with a very nice desperation diving poke right on the Kraken blue line by Schwartz to get that puck down the ice so they can get off on a change. And then finally, with the Kraken eventually able to get the puck, and then after, or actually more during, another change, Bjorkstrand's able to find Dunn on another stretch pass, but nowhere near as long as the one that Gord found Bjorkstrand on. And Dunn skates in with Gord coming onto the ice on that change, drawing both of the two Sharks players that were involved in this play towards him. Dunn eventually firing off the shot, maybe looking for a rebound, but he ends up catching Reimer off guard, putting it right through Reimer's 5-hole and winning the game for the Kraken. Again, another huge sigh of relief for Kraken fans, as sure, 1 point you can live with, but honestly, I don't know if you could live with 1 point in a game where you absolutely should have and needed 2 points. And of course, fortunately for the Kraken, the one goal that Reimer lets in that he really had a chance to stop is the one that ends up winning it for the Kraken. So, in the end, was it a pretty win? No, absolutely not. Will the Kraken probably end up getting stomped if they play this same style of game against Edmonton and Dallas in the next 2 games coming up, and honestly, probably even Nashville in the 2 after that? Yeah, probably they will. But they do end up coming away with the 2 points and hopefully some lessons to learn before those games as they come back home to play Edmonton in what, at least for now, is the most important game of the rest of the season. And, yeah, at least they get to start all over at the start of that game. And again, like we said in the beginning, if you can put aside how we end up getting to that final result, it is pretty much exactly the final result the Kraken would want, getting 2 points in the standings for themselves and making sure the Sharks come away with at least 1 point in the standings. Meanwhile, Dunn also, with that game-winning goal, gets to keep his still franchise record point streak going now at 11. Also, actually leading the team in points at this point, so that's something the Sharks and Kraken have in common. Fortunately, they don't have too many other things in common at this point in the season, but both are led in points by defensemen. And on top of that, it's also nice that the Kraken came out of this game healthy. As far as the 3 stars in this game, first off, I do have a bone to pick with whoever picks the official 3 stars in this game, as they didn't choose either goaltender, which I think is just an absolute crime. Honestly, both goaltenders should have been the first and second star, and there should have been no question about it. But of course, whoever hands out official 3 stars in the NHL pretty much will always pick whoever scores the game-winning goal in overtime or shootout to get the first star. And Dunn does get it. I mean, Dunn had a fantastic game, but yeah, the goaltenders were the story of this one. And when it comes to Kraken 3 stars, the first star for the Kraken is without question Philip Grubauer. He's the only reason this game even got to overtime in the first place, where the Kraken could salvage those 2 points. As far as second star, yeah, I think it's hard to ignore that Bjorkstrand probably had the best game for the Kraken, getting 2 points on the game, the goal that got the Kraken to overtime, and then gets the assist on the goal that ends up winning it for them in that overtime. And then the third star of the game, I did consider a couple of other guys here. I considered Eberle. Really, he was the only Kraken player that seemed like he was ready to play when the game started, other than Grubauer. McCann also had a number of shots on goal and somehow didn't score on any of them. Because, of course, again, you'd have a goaltender having the season that Reimer is, and a guy with a over 20 shooting percentage like McCann, who gets a number of shots, a few on the power play. Obviously, he's not going to score because that just makes perfect sense. But in the end, I am going to give it to Vince Dunn, even outside of the fact that he has the game winner and continues that 11-game point streak. He just continues to be one of the best Kraken players out on the ice, and although I did think that Beniers was going to run away with team MVP through the first half of this season, Dunn is making a pretty good case and honestly might even be passing Beniers at this point. It probably shouldn't even be close. Dunn is absolutely having an incredible season, which is also helped out by the fact that his defensive partner in Larson is also having a good season, just not quite as big as far as scoring is concerned like Dunn. But Larson also is probably worth considering for an honorable mention in this one. Anyway, let me know what you think down in the comment section, who your 3 stars would be, how you're recovering from this game emotionally, physically, if you have any heart issues or anything like that, and what we're thinking coming into this game against Edmonton with a couple of 100-point scorers in McDavid and Draisaitl, with McDavid already setting a cap era record for points on the season. So yeah, the Kraken are definitely going to have to figure out some stuff before that one. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. Until then, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, the buttons for that kind of stuff down below to support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. Until next time, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken!